Do you remember what that was like inside the aircraft? What exactly happened? You're touching down, and when did you know you had a problem?
You know, they land real hot, as you probably remember.
No, the full pars were fast.
They were fast and they land real hot. Right after we touched down, I remember, I was still in my naive stage, I guess. I remember a very sharp, abrupt right turn, and then lots of bumping. My first impression was, this guy's in a real hurry to get back to the taxi area for some reason, you know. But then you started seeing tundra going up by the windows and everything, and it just slid there and punched all the gear up, and it got real rough. And what I remember most is that Clay Morgan was on my right. He was from the call, a very funny, articulate guy. And we were somewhere in the middle of the load, so he's on my right. Immediately, I think the door had been pulled up, they put the door down, so I'm waiting for the guys to my left to go out the door. And then Clay, though, who was probably a little bit sharper than I was at that stage, he figured out that the escape door was over the wing there. So he punched that out, he dived through that over the wing and rolled off the wing. And in his own words, as I recall, he greeted us as we left the plane.
Yeah, that's good. I remember that very well. I remember flying it. The wing was back on. I remember seeing it over there on the side of the runway. Yeah.
I'll be darned.
We were in it was like twin planes. We were in the other one. I don't know why we were coming back. So, yeah, I was there in '77. Good. What else happened in Alaska?
You know, I'd have to say most of it was uneventful. You know, guys out there, certainly yourself, have more exciting jumps than I've had. Mine were pretty average. I think that perhaps the most memorable jump I ever had was we were on standby in Fairbanks around the first load, and they got us smoke up in the Brooks Range way inside the circle. And so we were dispatched there, and I was in the third stick. And we're heading up there, and I'd been around Alaska a bit, felt very comfortable. After a while, you get tired of jumping fires, you want something kind of a different fire, an interesting fire. So we're heading up there, it takes forever to get there, I can't remember how long out of Fairbanks. And you can look up through the window, through the pilot's window, you see this little bitty smoke just snaking up from the Brooks Range. You know, it's west of Anatubig Pass. I thought, oh, it'll be interesting, let's just drop two guys and we'll go have lunch in Kotzebue or something, you know. It'll be an easy jump. And I was more keen on having lunch in Kotzebue than I was jumping. So we get closer, and then this note on a torn piece of paper gets passed down from the cockpit, from the jump foreman who's in the right seat, and it says, the paper's torn and it says possible airplane crash. I said, well, that sounds interesting. This will be a kind of a different run before we have lunch. And so we get closer, and you can look through the cockpit window, and the fire's getting really big. It's burning really hot. It's obviously making a run in spruce and stuff like this. And then the wind is horrible. We're getting in the mountains. It's extremely turbulent. It's unjumpable. It's an unjumpable fire, and everybody knows it. And we're trying to circle, and people are falling all over in the turbulence, and they're trying to look out the door, and they drop two sets of streamers. And the spotter didn't have any choice. He was doing a good job. I can't remember his name. So he's circling, and we're bouncing all over the place, and it's an airplane crash. It was a float plane that tried to take off from a small lake. It's the old Alaskan float plane story. He could land, but he couldn't get off. So he punched his skids in, taking off into the tundra, and then went forward, and it caught on fire and wiped out the plane. And so it's clearly an emergency. And so the lake was there with the fire burning on one side, then this rushing river flowed into the lake, a big rushing river. And so they circled, and the spotter, dropped the first streamers, and we're all keenly watching the streamers. And they start for a while, then the wind would get them. This horrible monster wind would get the streamers, and it put them right into the fire. And that didn't strike us as particularly encouraging. So we're orbiting again, he throws out the second streamers, and they go right into the river. And they just disappear immediately. And so we're still circling, the first two guys are in the door. And I remember the first jumper in the door, he was from McCall, he's since passed away, I understand. And he'd been in Vietnam, and I think he'd been with the CIA there. And I remember reading on the Smokejumper list where he died perhaps of contact with Agent Orange or something like that.
Was that Granny Granowski, or no?
God, if
No,
I
he's
s-
from Reading. No, it was somebody else.
If I saw his name in print, I'd probably remember him. I remember him vividly in another McCall jumper, the first two guys in the door. And they're watching all this happen along with the rest of us. A lot of respect for those guys standing in the door watching everything going wrong. And then, so they jump and we're watching them, as you know, you're watching them while you're orbiting. And those guys go, both of them go right into the fire. It's a mix of small spruce and stuff. And so we're orbiting again, the second stick goes, they're in the air, but by then our stick, we're in the door and we're just watching the winds. And the wind just gets these guys and it's just pulling them across the ground. They're all hitting really hard and getting dragged and everything. And so then our turn comes, and make a long story short, our stick jumps. I was the first one, if I remember correctly, and the wind got me, and in those T10s you go backward because you can't steer in a hard wind. I hit extremely hard and almost got knocked out. Then I got dragged towards the fire. I remember rotor-tilling the tundra with my face mask, trying to pop the harnesses. And then the chute, it finally stopped. I got out just before the chute hit the fire. It later burned out. And to make a long story short, 8 of us jumped, 4 went into the fire. And the last fellow who jumped, number 8, was a last-minute replacement for Murray Taylor. I think Murray's family had been there, so he asked to be off the jump list so he could spend time with his family. So the last guy was a new guy, and he broke his femur. He went through a tree backwards, and they got him out of it. And what I was told some years later, that was really his last jump because it really smashed up his leg. But that was most memorable. There was nobody in the airplane after all this.
Yeah, and you didn't make lunch.
We didn't make lunch. Never saw Kotzebue again. Nobody in the airplane. And
How'd they get the guy with the broken femur out?
they flew in a Huey, and how they got enough fuel lined up to get the Huey there was never clear to me. And so they got him out. Then we later got out as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.